Bitcoin represents about half of the total cryptocurrency market cap, around, as you mentioned, well, around 700 billion. Ethereum is second with around 280 billion. One of the mentions is ADA, and I feel ADA has a massive upside potential. Its market cap is relatively small and it offers a lot of advantages. A lot of key players are coming out and creating these token wrapping systems where you can convert between ERC20 and ADA token fairly easily. What do you feel, Will, about the potential of ADA?
I think it's marvelous. I'd say there's two core reasons for this. One, it's technologically superior in terms of its Ouroboros technology versus the blockchain, meaning that not only is it faster, sort of memory-wise wider in terms of its bandwidth, but also, more importantly, its efficiency. Its efficiency is 100-fold better. So if, let's say, we compare like for like, let's say right now, Cardano was at 60K, similar to, well, 40K, similar to Bitcoin now, right? It would be a fraction of the environmental impact, virtually nothing. So you wouldn't get all these angry Greta, angry dads kind of, birds crying about it, basically. Well, look, and then the second aspect, which is, I'd say, even more important, the founders, I'd say, has got a great strategy going forwards, right? They've already tackled the concept that, look, you have to reinvest back into the technology to keep it at its superiority in terms of its technology. The guy very recently announced that he's reinvesting into it in order to combat quantum computing. Can you believe that? I mean, he's already talking about it now for 2030, 2035. With that kind of plan ahead.
Do you feel, compared to Bitcoin, where there isn't necessarily such a leader in that respect, we don't even know who created it, would you say that's an advantage ADA has, that it can navigate through, easily adopt?
Definitely, for sure. The fact that they're already planning for the future to boost it up, its technology, and combat further challenges, it makes it just more future-proof and more investable, more appealing for investors, and especially the big institutions, right? Keep them comfortable and say, look, you can invest in this for 20, 30 years. They'll love it. They'll absolutely love it. And they can get you a new fish tank. I still think, I still don't get the goldfish, mate. Come on, man. Help me out with that.
All right, we have to talk about something else, which is a viable part of cryptocurrencies, whether you love them or you hate them, is the concept of meme coins. What's your opinion about that, guys? I'll pass that over to El Gato.
Yeah, please. I don't want to talk about them.
The thing is again, we talk about two main sort of issues. Right? The first issue is there's no regulation. So these coins are generally as viable as any other coin on the marketplace. I think that's really now the perception of who's going to define the market. Is it going to continue to be like the cyberpunks, who actually kind of kicked this whole revolution off? Or now is the market going to start to be influenced, by the institutionals? Or is there like more space? Is there enough space in the market for everybody to sort of express that and find value? And this is now, what I think is just a dialogue that started. Like, what's this all about? As government starts,
it reminds me of a time of like the dot-com bubble, where you got all of these companies that just put in IT on their name to profit from. And I think eventually maybe you'll get a severe correction, but all of these coins will just dissipate, and then you're left with the solid ones moving forward, like as the
Well, what the beauty of it is the market is deciding what is necessary and what's not. And that's
Right.
exactly what we need right now, not more regulation,
Correct.
to suit
Correct.
some higher authority that thinks he knows it all.
That's it.
We need less of that. That's a disaster, in my opinion.
I
Let
read
the market decide what's right.
I fully believe in the free market, and this is an expression of that, right? And so, and I think this is the machine. This is the rage against the machine, you know. And who knows the market better? You know, these cyberpunks or like all these other sort of new players, big institutional players that say, hey, look, you know, we're going to show you how to generate value. But you know, if I look at the original, let's call them the believers, the original community, well, from their point of view, like, man, it took you 10 years, it took you a decade just to get to this stage.
Exactly. You know, call them the believers. They're waiting
Right.
for,
So it's like
what, 75% up, right?
Exactly.
Come on.
We're already
I,
on to what's next, right? So this is
I
the
read
point, right? And that's it.
I read an interesting report today. It was by the FCA, the UK government agency, right? They said, like, a big article, you know,
What, British
cryptocurrencies.
bullshit company, you mean?
Exactly, yeah. Cryptocurrencies are, you know, so dangerous. But one of the interesting points I remarked from there was that 14% of people borrowed money to invest in cryptocurrencies. What's your thoughts of borrowing money to invest in such an industry
Well,
where we
first
got
of all, I mean, I haven't looked at that specific data, but I would first question and break it down, right? And say, okay, out of that 14%, what's the demographics of those people? I guarantee it's probably, you know, individuals just barely on the poverty line, and they're desperate to try and do what they can. Can you blame them, right? You know, it's unfair to, you know, let's compare like for like. I think the biggest fraud case, I think, in UK for crypto was something along the lines of 14 million, right? Which may sound, oh, that's quite high, right? But then if you compare that to your everyday fiat currency, it's not even 1%. I think there needs to be more proportionality. Just because something is new, right? Let's not nitpick it. There'll always be an element of fraud, which is why, you know, anytime anyone gets into any market, it's important that they're educated and have some level of accountability or critical judgment. To go into any market thinking it's all rainbows is a flaw.
talking about regulation. Now we're on the point. Do you feel there's a need in the cases of like meme coins, etc., and people? There's a lot of scams going around.
But this is precisely the problem. Okay, if you're to ask yourself, what law should there be in place to prevent the shitcoins, right? You cannot say one. You wouldn't be able to derive one that cannot be, I don't know, loopholed or something. All you're going to do is you're just going to inhibit those that mean well and actually do offer a genuine service. So there's no point doing it. I would say let the market be free. Instead, I would say the government focus on education programs around the cryptocurrency market. But you see, they won't do that, right? And in my opinion, why? Because they want to be the leaders of their currency, not the crypto market, right? That's what they're scared of, because as soon as people start realizing, why the hell am I keeping savings of 50 to 100 grand on my pound that's losing money every day? Instead, I can put it into Bitcoin or any of the other deflationary financial instruments here. You know, it's a no-brainer, right? But the reality is, you know, it should be, you know, there should be more investment into education and schools. And look, don't get me wrong, this has already started in the United States. I've seen already articles where universities in the United States are already developing university degrees on this. So it's already started anyway, regardless of what government thinks.
Okay, so awesome. All right, yeah, it's a very good idea. I think education is really important. That's in an ideal world, that would be the best solution. But as we said, I think the governments are more worried about things getting
I
out.
think they're more worried about getting caught and lynched over the ridiculous rules that put in place recently.
The market itself, where do we feel cryptocurrencies are right now? Do you feel we've had a big correction since last month? Well, it
Well,
seemed to have come out, but we're not quite sure whether the market has bottomed for sure. Do you feel we still got further leg down, or do you feel we're
I think it's definitely stabilized and it's very soon to sharply rise again. Look, I urge anyone to very quickly just look at a very simple graph comparison between the money supply versus the Bitcoin price. And believe me, you'll see a very consistent correlation there. What's even more brilliant about it is there is a lag. So effectively, you could use that to predict what's going to happen to Bitcoin anyway. And hasn't been wrong so far. Of course, there's always going to be exceptions, right? But when you have somewhere like United States with the Biden administration already planning to spend another 6.3 trillion, I mean, I think we could safely accept that Bitcoin price or any would at least go up 30% purely because of the inflation of the dollar. So. What would you rather do?
like,
Wait on silver or what? We've only got 6 months left.
but it's
So,
crazy. The debt ceiling in the States is just out of control, and it just doesn't seem to be slowing down.
well, the
You've got
Fed
the
has already admitted, right, that they've had to extend their expectations of the inflation, right, by 1% already. So, and they're already full of crap, in my opinion. They know damn well it's game over, right? It's going to get way worse, way, way worse. Already articles coming out. Your famous investor from The Big Short, Michael Burry, has already come
yeah,
out saying it's going to be a shocker.
yeah. He told
Right?
us it's going to be
Get
twice
your
as twice as
wheelbarrows
bad as
out and
last
start
time.
withdrawing your pound or dollar, mate. That's what he's basically saying.
And even when you look at the Dow and you compare that to the Dow in the 1925 to 1930s, I mean, it's very much could easily, very easily we can
Shambolic is my word
get a
for
peak
it.
and crash. Yeah,
Oh, Gato, what do you think?
yeah,
You must be
exactly.
boiling at the moment with this.
Well, mate, I'm trying to wipe the smile off my face. Elgato, as you know, sort of represents what I would call like I won't say outlaw, but let's say more pirate mentality. So not to get too
Actually,
heavy,
mate,
but
how's that old fashioned, by the way? I haven't actually tried some. I'm gonna have
it's
a dip in that.
it's quite lovely actually, right? And I'm probably
Talking
going for
about that,
a second quite shortly.
I think I'm gonna have to dip into that. It does look pretty good.
Yeah. Look, mate,
Whilst you still couldn't afford it because of the inflation, right?
yeah. Well, if we do well
it
enough,
depends. Like, look, there's
if we do
lots
well
of
enough in the
payment
markets, we
things
can go
coming
our own
out.
distillery. Exactly.
We accept Bitcoin now, so if it means me
Funny,
traveling to El Salvador, fuck it, I'll do it.
Yeah, done.
a NASCAR driver just signed a contract today, and he'll be paid in Bitcoin, which is interesting.
Yeah,
So he's
absolutely.
taking
Yeah.
his salary in Bitcoin. But Bitcoin as a salary, I mean the market volatility of Bitcoin, you could be making 50% more or 50% less a month, as many people are.
50%? That's not fair.
Okay,
Look,
okay, that was an exaggeration, right? But this month we've had extreme volatility. It's been one of the most volatile months in the history of Bitcoin itself.
true. But funny enough, right, relative to the dollar, nothing. If you think about it, it's not really that much. And if anything, your cost of oil and everything's gone up, right? So actually, if people invested in Bitcoin, they would have got more value add.
Certainly
Funny
over
that, isn't it?
over the last 5 years, you would have done very well, right? But
But even with the last month, have you seen the price of oil? Have you seen the price of basic commodities in the last month? It's skyrocketed because of the inflation. If you kept the Bitcoin, you would have literally not lost money. Basically, it's not great. It would have gone up a bit, but it wouldn't have gone up as much.
sure.
This is what's so fascinating. This is why these times almost prove cryptocurrency is the way to go. That's what I love about it so much. They're trying their best to spin it so badly, and God bless the the mainstream media, not obviously, but they're doing their absolute best to smear this. Literally, they're getting undone by fact. I'm pretty sure anyone with a sensible understanding of finance will read those stories or articles and think, wait a minute, actually crypto is really good here. And it wouldn't surprise me. You're hearing all these private venture capitalists are now starting to some more under assets under management. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's driven because they read one of those articles and thought, actually, the crypto's sounding really hot and they can spin everything as much as possible. They can't deny that it's making people money, bottom line.
So the Federal Reserve, they've left at zero, near zero, and they're also looking at reducing buying of bonds. What do you feel? How do you feel that will impact the market?
Well, that's a representation of inflation, and they've done their best to sort of mask it and sort of hide it, underrepresent it. But certain commodities, particularly those in the capital markets like gold and maybe even perhaps silver, should start to appreciate a bit, right? Other commodities, the ones that are subsidized, like the softs and the grains and like even livestock, right? These are like more sort of social experiments because the government is very limited in how much someone will say pay for like a liter of milk or so, or like a hamburger, right? So they have to be very careful in that sense, otherwise there'll be anarchy. So where they can squeeze the balloon, as I like to say, right, create a value in somewhere else, but then creating less value in other places, is within sort of the financial markets, because that's not something that's truly visible. And that's the benefit of crypto, because it is quantifiable, it is visible, it is measurable, right? And it's decentralized, which means that in order for there to be changes, there has to be extremely broad sort of consensus and participation. And these are all things that the governments and other sort of governing bodies, don't want, because their position is historically based on their ability to sort of control and define these values. So we really are starting to see, I think, a very interesting sort of development. And I can't say there's going to be like a full-on rebellion, but it definitely is, representing a very clear dichotomy of interest. And we're going to see, how this plays out. And this is the beautiful part about the free market. The market will adopt the champion, right, of this.
There's a list of insurers adding exposure to Bitcoin, and the numbers are quite interesting. I mean, you got Donegal invested $1 billion this year. Grinnell Mutual, another $1 billion there. So there's definitely massive uptick in institutions going into the space. But then the SEC, on the other hand, they're coming out with warnings for investors to stay away from Bitcoin, futures funds and stuff. It seems like the institutions are going in, yet warnings from different agencies to stay away from Bitcoin. It's interesting to see the disparity between the two. But I guess that's why they're called smart money for a reason, right? So it's smart money's going in, and and then it's the unfortunate, the last people who end up investing at the peaks of the market. Okay. Any other topics you guys want to discuss
Well, the one actually I'm finding quite fascinating, and there's so much speculation and lack of direction, and I don't know if this is deliberate or whatever, but I don't know if you guys are aware that Ethereum is obviously hasn't got a cap of supply, right? But
Yep.
we're still hearing that sometime in July they're going to burn off it, right? But they're not stating how much, and they're not stating exact dates. So I'm just curious to know what impact that has on the demand of that. At the moment, obviously, it's had its downturn after its greatest price ever, right? But I'm a little bit surprised that it hasn't already picked up. You know, if people are thinking or truly believe that there's going to be a burn in July, I would have already expected people to jump in now, right? Especially if there's no exact date. There's lots of things going on in the background. And I bet very few people are aware that actually there are other forks that are going to take place. So I don't know if it's because of the confusion that people maybe believe it's going to end up like the other previous hard forks that actually jeopardize the price. And maybe that's what's causing this kind of sort of FUD, perhaps. Have you heard of Pulse Chain? That's really interesting concept. Started off with the Hex project, which effectively Hex is just very simply put, it's the equivalent of your savings account or high interest ISA. That's all it is, right? Basically you put it in, whether you buy the coin or stake it, effectively it develops a much better APR, very simply put. Now this Pulse chain is effectively supposed to be the superior version of your current Ethereum that also stakes automatically with the Hex style platform of its long-term interest rates that so-called continuously increase. So there's quite an interesting concept. But when I'm speaking to people, not many people actually know it exists. And this is what's a little bit concerning, or maybe that's by design. I don't know. But I'm really curious to know what on earth happens to Ethereum now. The more I look at this, the more there does seem to be a lot of confusion of what's going to happen there.
Very
So,
interesting.
yeah. I think there's gonna be like a bit of experimentation with the formula, and no one really knows what's gonna happen. Part of that makes me really sort of excited, because anything can happen, and that sort of creates like a tremendous amount of potential for us, right? From a speculation standpoint, a trading standpoint. So I don't mind if they try to change the sort of direction of travel, for some of this, because it'd be really interesting to see how robust the system is. Because we do know that, like I said, there's this relatively, sort of organic characteristic associated, with Bitcoin. And I'm curious to see if any other crypto or the market itself would sort of react, to, any sort of major intervention or, sort of process, implemented by like an outside force onto it, right? It would be really interesting to see how the market responds to that, because the blockchain exists and, will always will in the perpetuity, based on what it is. That record never goes away. But is that enough to support the value and the general efficacy of the coin? That remains to be seen. If everyone, all of a sudden abandons certain crypto, like, and it goes from where it is to zero, like, how does that what does that mean, in the end? I think mysteries that will be revealed at some stage, but
I
we
think
have
it's
it.
safe to say I don't think it'll ever go to zero. I think because of the fact of what I would classify the cult of Bitcoin, people are gonna hodl till the end of days. I think. I
Yeah.
just, for me, that's kind of a certainty that, well, at least until they're 80 or 90 anyway. So
It
what's
might
that?
become a
2050,
relic or something.
2060? But
It'll
yeah,
become
they're
a
going to
relic.
be holding the rest of their lives, right? Surely.
Mhm.
All right. What do you guys think of the last week, the Dutch central bank? Okay, they were forcing cryptocurrency exchanges in Netherlands to have map each address to for verification requirements, right? It was a very stringent kind of verification requirement for people on their exchanges. So they brought the Dutch central bank to court and they won the court case. So we're seeing at least there's a layer of government of court, right? Backing up what's right, which is nice to see. I think that was a nice positivity
Look,
out of
I think at the end of the day, and this is what I say to anyone regarding all this, right? It, I think Elgato, specified it so well that there's the game being played where they're sort of say the big dogs out there, the usual markets are in a position where they don't really understand and know anything about crypto, but they absolutely know its potential, right? And they know that that's going to take over in the future. Let's all be frank about that, right? But the position they're in is the fact that they weren't first to the market for once. They are behind the curve. They are FOMO at the moment, very much. So they are desperate to find an edge or a way or something to give them that kind of leverage or that spot where it makes them number one again. There may be, right? But how I see it in terms of where they already stand versus where the public are, they've got a long way to go. A long way to go. And we're already seeing the public, getting a much greater understanding of the fact of the problems with the current currency and the fact that everybody knows now, I don't think anybody isn't aware of the debt issues that these central banks are plagued with, right? So I think it's going to be very difficult for them to, let's say they create their own cryptocurrency, right? And they rebrand, the digital dollar, let's say. Even an institution will be very afraid to join that over your Bitcoin. Why? Because they don't want the debt. Why would they be too stupid? They're not, they're smart money, remember? They don't want to buy into debt. They want to get rid of the debt. There's no logic to that. The reality is the central banks are in a position, or the big institutions, where they are desperate to get in that market, but they've got to do it where, and they're trying to do it on their terms. And I truly believe this will be the case. The market will decide that, not those guys. We're too far in. Technology changes significantly. They've already lost.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's hard to disagree with that, because people forget what it all is, what it's all, what everything's about, why it was created, and this has so much dimension that I think it's going to be impossible for the big institutions to capture all of it. But they can just basically own their piece. But I think really what they want to participate in is only really a fraction of the capacity of the technology in the new asset class, right? And